Templates are great for stamping out multiple copies of content, but honestly, how often do we repeat the same exact content on a page? Sometimes, sure, but often you need to vary it slightly. So you want to pass in variables into your template to customize what it displays. This allows you to make some or all of the content dynamic and determined in code if that's what you need, but still have the template control display declaratively. We can do this by passing a context object into the ngTemplateOutlet directive and then referencing it in our template using interpolation. The real benefit to this is that it potentially avoids creating a lot of extra components if you just need to alter some simple displayed data. Remember, templates don't have an associated class, so there typically isn't any way to run some code for a template. If you didn't know about ngTemplateOutletContext, you might have otherwise created separate components for this, which a lot of time would be overkill. Certainly this isn't going to be the right approach if you're changing large amounts of the content, but for smaller, simpler content modifications, simply switching out the context can be a nice approach. Let's go take a look. ngTemplateOutletContext is going to work nicely when we have a template that contains the structure that our content is going to be presented within. But the details of that content might change from one instantiation of the template to another. So the template outlet context allows us to specify some details to get passed into the template. So there's three different scenarios that I have on the screen here. We're going to take them one at a time. We're going to start with no context. We've seen this before, but I just want to call it out so you know kind of what the basics are. And no context is just whatever's in the template gets put on the screen. There's no dynamic aspects to it at all. Looking over in the code, we have our HTML page, and here's where we have the ng container, and it's going to go look for the no context template. Come down to my templates down the bottom here, and here is my no context template. So you can see the content is hard-coded inside the template itself, and whatever is in the template is what's going to get displayed up here in place of this ng container. And that's what we see on the screen here. In the second scenario, we are specifying a context. It's fixed, and it's marginally more useful, but still not where we want to end up. Taking a look at that in our HTML, we're saying, here's my ng container. We're going to use the fixed context template. And the context we're going to pass in, we have specified right here inside the ng container. So some more value, but not as much. You can see we come down here, our template is much shorter. It just has a template reference variable of fixed context. And then we have our references into our context. We're saying let content type equal the content type from the context, and let details equal details. So whatever is in the content type of the context is going to go here, and the details will go here. So when we come up and take a look at the context, you can see here we have our content type, and here we have our details. But again, now it's hard-coded inside the container. Not as useful as it could be. Ultimately, where we want to get to is a truly dynamic context. So here we can have one piece of context that gets displayed when our condition is true, and this could be retrieved from a server or doing some type of manipulation of content before it gets passed into the context. But then we can have that conditionally change. So we changed our condition, and the content down below changed. Taking a look at that inside our markup, the dynamic context, we again have our ng container. ngTemplateOutlet is now going against dynamic context. And you'll notice that the content of this template is the same as the one above it. Slightly different in the use of our context variables. We now just say let content type instead of let content type equals content type. We'll talk about the $ implicit in just a moment. And then we have let details equals details. The difference when we display this information is that we're getting our context dynamically. It makes a call to get the context. It goes out to this function, getTemplateContext. That comes in and takes a look at our condition and returns either context1 or context2. Context1 is defined right here. Now again, this could be coming from a server. I just have it hard-coded in here for the sake of the demo, to make the demo self-contained. But you can see we have this $ implicit. You can think of that as the default. When you don't specify where to get a particular context variable from, like this, that's where you're going to get the $ implicit. You can only have one of those, one default. Everything else you need to specify which property out of the context is that going to be pulling its value from. So we have the $ implicit, and we have our details. And then when we click the button, our condition changes, and we switch over to using context 2. Also uses the $ implicit and has different details. So this gives us the ability to have the same structure to our template, but swap out some of the information, some of the details that get displayed within that structure. And that's where the ngTemplateOutletContext on top of ngTemplate really starts to provide some value in giving us the ability to dynamically update our UI based on some programmatic conditions determined at runtime.